Hey folks, good morning. Again, my dog thinks I'm talking to her. Settle down, Izzy. Let's see. Today is going to be a little bit of an exercise in color mixing because I'm a little lost. These colors are so much brighter than the typical portraits that I do. I basically used the dropper tool and I've pulled out samples of probably way too many colors. I really just wanted to initially get colors of her face along the side here. I was struggling with that, and then that really bright area over here. But I'm a little OCD, and once I got started, I went around the clock of her face and grabbed some colors that I thought might be a fun exercise to try to recreate with you guys. So I think what we'll do is we'll start with we'll just do a color mixing exercise, and then as we're doing it, I'll explain what I'm doing. So I think the first thing I want to do is just as a warm-up, I want to do some easy colors. So I'm thinking under her eye here. So that's this color. What's the easiest way to show you? So that's this color here that we're going to do. And so that's purple. And then so what you do, the exercise, is you mix color and then you just put a little drop on the photo. You'll know that you got the color right because the paint will disappear into the background color. So why don't we try that? So again, we're going to do this color here, which is shadow under her eye. All right, there we go. This doesn't need to go here. I'm going to knock that off. All right, so we are going to do this color here above her, below her eye, between her eye and between this rosy spot here. So I'm going to start with white and we're going to go with red and blue. It also looks a little purpley to me. So then you just take it and you drop it up here, and I need to use more paint. And then so you can see how much lighter I am than what the actual color is. But I think I got the color right. It's just needs to be darker. So we'll put some more red in there, basically make it more purpley. So that I could already tell. And this is the problem, is I always make these too dark, but let's try it. So now we're too dark. So I'm gonna grab a paper towel, and I should be able to wipe that off. So not as good as I'd hoped, but so let's go a little bit lighter. And that is just perfect. So as purple as that is, that's the color we want. All right, so we've got that one. That was easy enough. And that's what you'll find is the colors are easy enough to paint or to mix, but it's just your eye is off. All right, so let's try another one. So let's go down her face a little bit into this blushy area here. So this one here, where you can see it's a little bit red. So I guess we'll start at, what is this, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. I don't quite have it like a clock, but why don't we do it like this, and we'll hit that blush color. She's got 2 different blush colors, so it's here and here. And that's a thing to think of too, or to keep in mind. The shadow side of the face, even though it's the same general area, the color will be different, right? So on the lighter side of the face, it's a little more orangey, a little lighter. So let's fix that. All right. And maybe, why don't we start from scratch each time? So each time I'll wipe up this color and we'll just start from the beginning. Normally what I would do is work from the same pile, but why don't we start from scratch and talk about it? And you guys should definitely do along. It doesn't have to be, well, I didn't give you much warning, but if you're watching the VOD of this, I would pause it, print out a picture, and try to do the same. You don't have to make these swatches or whatever. You could do it right on the photo. Something that I try to do that didn't work out for me is I do have access to a lamination machine, and I laminated a couple versions of these, and it unfortunately that thin layer of lamination makes the color change about a stop, and it also grays it a little bit. So the lamination, that cellophane or whatever that plastic is over that lamination layer, just changes the color too much, and it really changes the contrast too. So all right, so we're going to do this color here to me. So the first thing I do is, what is that? It's a light red, and it's got a little bit of orange in there. So a light red and a little bit of yellow, but it's also a little bit brown, so we got to add some blue in there. So let's try it. So we'll go, to me it's a little bit red, right? It's orangey, so I'm going to skip Normally I would throw golden or yellow ochre in there, but let's just try it with yellow. Right, so this is going to orange it up a little bit more. Remember that Cad Red is pretty powerful. That might be a little too orangey. So let's get some blue in there. And that's going to brown it up. So let's take a look at this. This looks really saturated to me. But just to see where we're at, let's take a little dollop and put it on here. So a couple things jump out at me. It's way too dark, right? So let's lighten it up with some white. And when I lighten it up with white, I see that it needs to be a little redder. So let's just grab just a little bit of that. And of course that increases the saturation a little bit. So let's put some blue back in there. Now let's see how we're doing. Again, still too dark. Probably grab too much white. Problem with color mixing too is the color does look different when you've got your palette at a different angle in a different spot than your canvas or panel. Let's try that. Ooh, how does that look to you guys? So that is pretty close. I would say you guys can't quite see it on the camera, but it's maybe a little light. I think it could be just a little darker and maybe a little bluer. So let's go in the center here and grab this. Let's try that. And that is pretty close. I think that is close enough. So let's see how we did on our panel. So again, that's this color around the nose. And I don't think we're that far off there. We're not that far off. It's kind of this way though. All right. And then there's obviously between here and here, there's transition color. And so what I would probably do is I'd do a mix of these two colors to make that transition work. All right. So 2 down. All right. Now let's do that shadow in that little crease of her nose. So we talked about it earlier. That's going to be redder. So anywhere there's a crease or a wrinkle, it's typically redder because that's where the skin is thinner. And so you can see the blood vessels. So again, we'll start with the red. And this is darker, so I won't start with white, but I'll get a little bit of white in there. And then again, blue. It's obviously too dark. Let's get some white in there. That's too much blue versus the red. So let's get some more red in there. Just hold it up there. So without even dabbing it on there, that's pretty close. I think maybe a little bit lighter. So that's pretty close. A little bit on there. Probably a little dark and a little bit blue. So let's add some more white. So that lightened it up, but we got to get some red back in there. I really want to use that alizarin crimson. I know that would get us close really fast, but I'm trying to just use the primaries. So now we went a little bit too white. You guys can see that. But I think it's lighter, and so it needs to be darker and needs to be redder. So the red is darker, so that's just naturally going to make it darker. See how we did. That's looking pretty good. Let's put a little dollop on there. A little bit too light still. So I always have, well, let's see. I'm going to do what I said, and I'm going to stick with my limited palette. I was going to say I always have transparent red oxide on my panel or on my palette. So I was going to dip into that. But let's see how good we could do with just the primaries in the limited palette. That is looking pretty close to me. All right. I'm going to go with that. So let's see how we did. Oh, I guess I should have taken a little bit of this, put some of that on here. So we're obviously, I don't think we got to it yet, so I'm not going to be too hard on myself, but I think we could have done a little better job there. It's quite a bit darker than what we had. All right, so I'm really interested now in this color. This is a color here that started this whole thing. So let's take a little bit of this and hold it up here. So see how much brighter that is? So even though this looks white, so it's also kind of a peachy color. So it's a little orangey and a little darker. So that's where I get into trouble. So let's grab some yellow. Let's grab some red. So the first thing, I guess I didn't go through order of operations, but when I'm mixing colors, the first thing I do is I try to get the color, and then I'll lighten it and darken it as needed. Lightening and darkening doesn't necessarily always mean adding white. I'd actually prefer to do another color if that gets me closer to the target color. I'd rather, to lighten it up, I'd rather use yellow or golden ochre or something that's already mixed on my palette. But sometimes like this, where it's so white, you really have no choice but to add white. So I think I've got the color. It's kind of a little peach color, but it just needs to be lighter. And I think it needs to be yellower too. So let's grab some more yellow. Problem is all of my colors are too powerful. Let's take a second to think about that. So again, I'm in the ballpark, but it's just too dark. So I think it still needs to be a little bit lighter. Let's see, how can I show you? Let me put it on there. So a little bit lighter. Let's do it. Let me wipe that off. It's still whiter. So I'm gonna use this brush to put it on. So I was so close that I didn't trust that I was actually putting paint on the photograph. So that's when you know you've got it, is when you put the paint on the swatch and you can't see it. So that's perfect. And let's just check again. Let's see how close to white that is. So let me find this dark spot here. So this is the color, our target color. And let's grab some titanium white. Clean our brush off, get right into the clean spot there. And let's just go right on top. So see how much brighter and whiter titanium white is? Let me put some titanium white in that swatch too. So crazy, right? Looks white to me, but it's obviously a little darker. All right. So that took a while. So you could see we went all the way from this all the way down to this. But I think spending a half hour and going through this exercise is worth it. So normally what I would do, and I'll do this, I guess the next time we paint, is I would mix enough of that color to where I could use it later. I'd like to do her lipstick colors. I'd like to do the pinks. Let's get the shadow color. Let's do the greens of her eyes. And let's do her eyes. And then maybe that'll end it for the session for today, but let's do that. So next, let's do the pink of her. There's two main colors that I see in her lips. Well, there's three, right? There's the light side, there's the dark side of her lips, and then there's the line of her top lip touches her bottom lip. Basically the crease where the two lips meet. There's a quite a bit darker color. But that's usually easy. I would probably start with the transparent red oxide, and then I'd probably use a alizarin crimson to make the crease where the lips meet. And then this area over here, that's a little more alizarin crimson than I think the center of the lips. But let's do the light. So let's do this kind of pink color here. And that's the light side of her lips. So again, this is a lighter color, so I'd probably start with white. And then I'd go right in with the Cad Red Light. And this one's going to be easy. I think that's pretty close as it is. But let's take a look. So I think I got lucky and made that color first shot out of the box. Just testing real quick to make sure I'm even laying down some paint. Let's get some more paint out there. Yeah. So we got lucky with that one. It's basically pure white and pure Cad Red Light. I guess we kind of knew that. So I'm going to clean up this and I'll clean my brush. All right, so let's do the dark side of the lips now. So that's this section here, and that's this swatch. So this one, to me, that is literally, let's test it. To me, that's straight out of the tube alizarin crimson. So alizarin crimson out of the tube is a little bit dark, but let's just, I think if you're a portrait painter, you kind of have to have alizarin crimson in your palette, but we'll do it both ways. So we'll lighten up alizarin crimson, and so that's exactly what it is. It's just a alizarin crimson and a little bit of titanium white. But for your guys' sake, let's see if we can mix that. So Cad Red Light to me is a little orangey. And I think that's why I like it for skin tones, is most of our skin tones are closer to orange than they are red. So what would I do to make that more cool and dark is I would add a blue. Of course that made it brown. So let's get some more red in there. Blue. Just curious what happens if we put some yellow in there. And it may not be possible to make that color with the colors that I have. The more blue I add, the more darker it gets. And I think if it was a natural color, we'd probably be closer, but she's obviously wearing lipstick, so I'm gonna say this is a color that I can't make. I can't mix this color with the colors that I have. We can't even get close. So this is a case where a model has lipstick, sometimes you can't make that color. You can get close, but I can't make that color without alizarin crimson. But at least now I know. Right now I don't have to sit here trying to mix that color all day and ultimately give up. All right, so that's it for the lips. So we could do the light side of the lips, but not the dark side. I don't want to give up. Let's try it again. Let's try it one more time. So I don't even think I want to try it. I think with my Cad Red Light, my Cad Yellow, white, and French Ultramarine Blue, which would be my limited palette, I don't think I can make that color. Let me just try it real quick, because I think what the problem is that say if I start with blue and I add red, it makes a nice brown, but it doesn't make that purpley color. You see orange on the monitor. I see, yeah, orangish brown. I can make it a darker brown by adding more blue. And that is a known problem with, I want to make a purple, and that is a known problem with Cad Red and French Ultramarine, is you can't make a good purple with it. So just to see where we're at color-wise. So that is light purple. I think if I add white, and that's a good, if you can't tell what color you've mixed, throw some white in there and that'll help you determine. And so that's pink, probably more pink than even orange. Orange is pink, I guess. Probably more of a reddish pink. But there's no sense me putting any yellow in here. That's so that's the only other color that we haven't tried. But if I put yellow over here, since this area is mostly blue, it's going to make it green. And if I add some yellow on this red side, that's going to make it more of an orange. So none of these colors are close to that red. So we're going to give up on that one. Most painters I paint with have alizarin crimson on their palette, or at least in their bag of colors. That's probably one of the first convenient colors that most people get is alizarin crimson. But let's give up on that one and move on. Let's see, maybe the two colors in her neck. These are we haven't really done this. These are browns. So why don't we do one? Why don't we pick this darker brown? So that one we already just made. So I know that brown is orange and blue. So this is a mix of all of our colors. So we'll get some yellow down there. And it's lighter, so I know at some point we're gonna have to add some white. But let's get that brown going. I guess there's three things that I think about when mixing colors. There's the color, and then there's the saturation. So how intense that color is, and then there's the lightness and the darkness. So I think I've been forgetting to talk about saturation. So this is a brown. It's an orangey brown. It's an intense brown. So much more intense than, let me put a little dollop on there. So much more intense than our target color. So to desaturate a brown, which is an orange in this case, at least where I'm at. So to saturate an orange, you'd use the complementary color, which is a blue. And that's how I mentioned before. But a reason that I have 3 different blues on my palette is to desaturate oranges and skin tones. So I'm just going to go, since we're going with our limited palette, I'm going to go with French Ultramarine and get some in there. Knowing that this is going to darken up my brown as well as desaturate it, but we already talked about it. I already know that I'm going to have to lighten it up with some white. So that's a browner. It's less orange, it's more brown, but it's darker. So let's get some white in there and see how we're doing. And I think that's going to nail it right there, just that little bit. So let's see how we did. Whoops, still too dark though. So let's get some more white in there. And I slough off a little bit of the white up here because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes how much of a color you have on your brush, especially with my eyesight. So let's wipe that off. Still too dark. That's pretty good there. So I think that's got it. All right, so enough of that. Let's do the dark side of our blush, and then we'll do some eyes. So again, a brown is a blue and an orange. So that to me means that I'm going to use my blue, my red, my yellow. Because we got blue, and then what makes orange is red and yellow, right? So there's our orange. You guys see that as orange? And then we'll mix these two together to make the brown. Like last time, our brown is a little too light or too orangey. So we'll add some more blue. So the first thing we're going to do is match the color. That blue also knocks down the saturation. So I think that color isn't too bad. Actually, it's a little redder, I believe. Let's try that. But it's a little dark, as you can see. So I was talking about it before. So what are a couple ways to lighten that color? So we could just jump right in with white, but basically you could use any lighter color. So I do have yellow ochre out here. So my reflex would probably be to grab some yellow ochre or some yellow and try it. But I know that that's going to make it more orangey. We can show you that up here. So that makes it more yellowy and orangier. Remember, it's desaturated because it's got all that blue in there. But if it didn't have all that blue, it would be orangey. And then what it did is it made a yellow ochre. So no sense trying the yellow ochre because we just mixed it, right? The yellow ochre is a little lighter, but to me that's really similar. It just needs to be lightened up a bit. And why don't we test that? We really just made yellow ochre. I guess I could go a little yellow and a little lighter, but just with the paint that I had on my brush. So no sense yellow ochre because that's taking us away from what we want to do. So we're gonna have to do the last resort, which is add a little bit of white. So let's try that. Let me go down here where I don't have any paint. So that looks pretty good to me. So boom, just like that. We made brown. All right, now let's do the eyes. I thought the eyes would be interesting. Let me bring up that image again. Color match. So check this out. So look how this sclera, so here, I'll move this over here. Look how the whites of the eye, the sclera around the eyes, so look how the left side is a green, like an olive, like a really light olive. And then how the top part is, I don't know, mauve, is that the color? But they're certainly not white. Neither one of these are white. And that's always an interesting exercise. We all know, I don't know if we all know this, but beginners, we always paint the whites of the eye white. And at least on this dark side of her eye, it's so far from white. And then of course the green of her eye, I wanted to try to color mix too. But let's get rid of this real quick. And back to our color mixing. Let's do this, the left side of her eye, that green there. So what makes green? Yellow and blue. So let's start with that. So we've got a green, but obviously way too dark. So again, let's try some, just to experiment. So the lighter colors that I have at my disposal, red, you don't want to mix red with green because that'll gray it down. And I think because red is a complementary color, I think we've got the right color and possibly the right saturation, but we need to lighten it up. I don't want to use yellow either. I don't think I want to use yellow. I've got some yellow on my brush, so let's just try it. I think that just makes it a lighter green. Why don't we leave that on here just for giggles? I think that makes it a little too light and a little too saturated with that yellow. We basically put the saturation back into the green by adding yellow. We don't want to do that. So let's get that yellow off our brush and then see what white does. So take some white. So that's too much white. So what did we do here? So that's made it a bluer color. So let's put that white in the saturated green and see what that does. I may have guessed wrong here. So that's actually closer, right? But maybe a little too saturated. So that up there. So that's closer, but a little too saturated. So what do we do to knock down the saturation in green? We add red. So I totally guessed wrong. This color here was actually less close or farther away from what we wanted than the saturated green. But now we just need to desaturate that a little bit. And so we desaturate it with red. So this red is super powerful. So get just a little bit on your brush. So that's even after wiping it down. That's how powerful that red is. Let's see now. Pretty close, just a little bit light, a little bit dark. So let's lighten it up. Let's wipe that off. Close, but maybe a little too light. So our only options for darkening it back up, we don't want to do yellow because that's not really darkening it. So our only option really is blue. So let's get just a little bit of that. Let me wipe this off. And voila, that did it. All right. So the green of her eye, so that's actually crazy enough. That is the color, the white of her eye is that weird green color, that light olive color. Very interesting. Let's do that dark green. So again, we'll start from scratch. So this is the color of her eyes, is this green right here. Another thing that I should say too, if you do these colors, if you only paint, we want to blend colors and do, there are going to be gradients of these colors in these areas. But these are just, I try to get basically an average of that area. But if you were to just paint her iris this color green, it would look like a stamp, right? If you were to paint this whole area of her face this color, it would look like a stamp or like a color by numbers or paint by numbers. And that's kind of why I don't start from scratch every time I mix a color. I mix colors based off of previous colors so that you get the gradients, right? So don't do that. Don't paint her whole lip this color on the dark side. It's a mix of this color and this color, maybe something else, right? So through here, this is orangey, right? But these are the base colors for these areas. So let me be clear about that. And then these colors move around, right? So this red of her nose, that's this color here. So, right, we could use these colors in other places. Now that you have it in front of you and you've gone through the trouble of making these swatches, it's easy to see that this is just that. But don't make her whole iris this color. It's a mix of this color and then the outer edges of it are quite a bit darker, almost towards a blue-black. But I don't know, just to get that clear. Something else we didn't do is her eyebrows. But you can see her eyebrows are close to this, probably a darker version of this blush, the shady side of her blush. And that's why I have mother colors, right? So I'll have a dark, I'll have my darks, some other pile of darks, and then I'll have some, from that I'll build my flesh tones off of that so that it'll be a gradient of all these colors. And then I'll have another pile for her lips, kind of a reddish pile. I'll have another pile for colors in her hair, and then one obviously for her base skin tone. But let's do that green like I keep saying and not doing. So yes, I know I have green right here, but again, we're going to start from scratch. So we're only using 3 colors, again, 3 colors in white. So green, what makes green? Blue and yellow. So let's grab some yellow. And I must have really cleaned my brush good that time because that green is really saturated, right? So I'm going to ask myself, and I should have said this earlier, is I always ask myself, what does it need to be? Does it need to be more yellow? No, it's actually a little too yellow. Does it need to be more red? I don't know. I think red obviously would desaturate it, but let's hold off on desaturating. Let's try to get the color first. Or does it need to be more blue? And I think, yes, it does need to be more blue. It's a little too yellow. And then to darken that up and desaturate it a little bit, I would add some more blue. So let's do that. So again, and this is Mark Carter from Draw Mix Paint. That's where I learned the whole ask yourself, does it need to be redder, bluer, or more yellow? What does it need to get closer to the color that you want? So blue, adding blue, definitely got us closer. So let's just test real quick. So interesting enough, this pile is lighter than her eyes. So what do we do to make it darker? We don't have many options, right? We've got yellow, red, and blue. So yellow value-wise isn't really darker. It's quite a bit lighter. Red, I think, is kind of almost the same value, maybe a little bit lighter. So the only option that we have to make it darker is blue. So let's get some more blue in there. All right. So now we've added blue, and it's getting closer. So that's a little bit too dark, I think. But as I'm looking at it, I'm like, it's a little too dark and a little too saturated, but the color is about right. So I think we got the color right. It's just a little too dark. So what's our next step? So next step would be saturation. So right, you get the color, you get the saturation, and then you get the lightness or the darkness. So to go lighter, if I add yellow, that's going to change the color, right? Probably more than I want. And so my other option is white. So let's just get a little dab of white. And this white will do 2 things. It'll desaturate it just a little bit, and then of course it'll lighten it. All right, so let's try that. Get a new spot here. So that I went too light. And that is a complaint about titanium white. It is powerful. So let's grab a little bit of this light mixture. Instead of dipping back into that titanium white, let's dip into this light mixture and then just mix it more into the colors that we have already mixed. I'll avoid that saturated part of the color. So let's try that. Wipe this off. This one ended up being one of the more challenging ones. So that's too light. So let's get some red in there. Because at this point the red is darker, and I think that's done it. It might still be too light. I've seen two different versions of it. It reflects a lot lighter, and it seems to be drying really fast in this area. Let's just try, just to double check, we could try a little blue over here, but I think I know what that's gonna do. I wanna wipe off this section too. Keep getting tempted to use it. I think that blue fixed it up. That white makes it chalky around the outside when it dries, but while it's wet, the blue is what fixed it. So you only got 3 colors to choose from in white, so experiment a little bit. So that's the green of our eyes. I don't think we need to do that. We've played around with some of this purplish pink over in here. That's very similar to what's on our neck. So I think that's pretty much it. But I guess we'll end it here, and I'll see you at the next session. But this was a fun exercise. Hopefully it taught you all some lessons about color mixing, or at least how I do it. All right, see you next time.